Welcome to Rooted and Unwavering, a podcast and radio show which features leaders from all walks of life in conversations about courageous connectedness. How do we stay connected to our best selves, especially when we are challenged? What becomes committed to our own and others' greatness, also when we don't feel it? Join host Hylke Faber, transformational coach, facilitator, and award-winning author of Taming Your Crocodiles, and his guests as they explore leadership greatness in today's episode of Rooted and Unwavering.
Welcome back to Rooted and Unwavering. We are broadcasting live today from Phoenix, from Florida, and behind the scenes also from Thailand, where we help people and leaders connect more deeply to their innate potential. This is episode 49. I'm your host, Hylke Faber, and I'm really grateful to be here today with Nicole Stott, who is an aquanaut, an astronaut, a mom, an artist, and many other things as well that we'll learn about. Nicole, how are you today?
I am doing very well, Hylke. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you.
You are very welcome. It's an honor, and it feels very fitting to sit here with you in this week, which has been so important, I think, in many people's lives following elections, talking about how we can be the greatest crew members on this planet, which is a phrase that I learned from you. I'm going to talk a little bit about Nicole in a moment to introduce her properly. And before I do that, I always start this podcast with a brief reflection of why we're doing this, why we're talking about Rooted and Unwavering. And if this week was any example of that, it's so easy to fall back in places where we are not rooted and wavering, where we're disconnecting, where we're polarized, where we fall back into brain patterns, mental ideas that divide us, that don't feel good, that don't make progress, that are about, you'd say, very primitive thinking. I noticed this in myself when I watched the election results come in. My reptilian brain was doing a number on me. And then I was grateful for this practice or this orientation of what I call connectedness quotient, where we integrate the wisdom of connecting deeply to ourselves, to others, and our purpose here. Like, what's really going on? What is this really about? There's an inner quiet that comes. There's wisdom that comes. And that is what this podcast is about. To sit with leaders from all walks of life, to hear their stories, so we can be inspired to take our seat when our brain wants to run around and do a number on us and others that doesn't help anybody. So Nicole Stott is with us today. She is one of those people that I like to sit at the feet of. She is an astronaut, aquanaut, artist, and author of this beautiful book called Back to Earth, What Life in Space Taught Me About Our Home Planet and Our Mission to Protect It. And most importantly, she says she's a mom. She creatively combines the awe and wonder of her spaceflight experiences with her artwork to inspire everyone's appreciation of our role as crewmates here on Spaceship Earth. She is a veteran NASA astronaut. She's been on 2 space flights and has been living and working in space for 104 days. I just want you to feel that 104 days. That's more than 3 months on both the International Space Station and the Space Shuttle. Some highlights included performing a spacewalk. She was the 10th woman to do so, flying the robotic arm to capture the first HTV. She'll explain in a moment what that is. Working with an international crew in support of the multidisciplinary science on board the orbiting laboratory, painting a watercolor that's now in the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum, and of course, a life-changing view of looking at our home planet from space. She's also a NASA aquanaut, which means that she went deep underwater in preparation for space flight. She was part of what's called the Nemo 9. This is not a joke. This is the name of this underwater laboratory. It's called of the Aquarius laboratory, where she was for 18 days in a saturation dive mission. She stands for an international model of peaceful and successful cooperation that she has experienced in the extreme environments of space and sea. And she believes that this holds the key for the same kind of peaceful and successful collaboration that we can have as humanity here on Earth. The last time she was in space was in the early, like the 2011. She will correct me in a moment, I think. On her post NASA mission, she is a co-founder of the Space for Art Foundation, uniting a planetary community of children through awe and wonder of space exploration and the healing power of art. When I first met Nicole a couple of months ago, I was very struck by how normal of a person she is. And now there's this astronaut which has been on so many TV shows and has done something that most people, 99.9999999% of humans never get to do. And there she is. You're humble with a deep sense of service. So Nicole, welcome. Welcome. So
Wow, thank you. I love that though. You know, one of the greatest compliments I can get is, and my colleagues feel the same way. It's when somebody says, "Oh, you're just so down to earth." You know, I expect, you know, it's like, I don't know what's expected, but it's really a nice thing to say, because I think, you know, we're just human beings that get to do something that's just a little bit different.
Yes. And what a gift that is to be able to share it and make it accessible to all of us. So tell us about connectedness. What have you learned about connectedness in your life and leadership? Tell us about that. I can't wait to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear. Oh, well, I think, you know, across the board, for sure, you know, connectedness to me really has to do with relationships, with respect, with something that we call in the astronaut world and in other, you know, operational environments, situational awareness, like not just being like into yourself, but really aware of the environment, what's going on with the people and the place and, you know, everything else around you. I think that allows us to connect in a very positive way. And, you know, having had the opportunity to be in space where you're, you know, above the earth, where you have this really extraordinary vantage point of our planet, of who and where we all are in space together, I remember thinking that I might feel disconnected, like, okay, you know, it's the farthest. I'm always hopeful that I might get to go like to the moon or somewhere even further. But, you know, at that point, the farthest I had ever been off the planet. And yet I felt more connected looking through that window back at Earth and all that I knew about that place, but that I was discovering from looking at it from a totally different perspective than I think I sometimes had when I had my feet on it. And so I think for me, that really opened up this idea of not just connection, but of interconnectivity, and how everything is so connected, so tied together in a way that there's a dependence whether we want to believe it or not. And I think that perspective allowed me to bring it back to earth, and, you know, and then think about that in all the stuff I do just on any regular daily basis, that that reminder that there's nothing that's independent of anything else.
Do you remember that first moment when you caught a glimpse of Earth sitting out in space? I'm thinking about the first time as a child I took a plane and I was above the clouds. So what was it like that very first moment? Do you remember that?
I do, and it was very, like you say, it was very similar to that sensation. You know, my dad built and flew small airplanes when I was growing up, so I got to fly in these little things. I have vivid memory of that first time lifting off the planet, looking back, you know, and seeing cars look like little toys, and how our houses, you know, you thought one city was so far from the other, and yet they're not. And and there was a beauty to it too, right? And that same kind of thing, looking out the window of the space shuttle. And that's where I had my first view of Earth from space, was through like the cockpit window of the space shuttle. And I thought I had prepared myself, right? I had spoken to my colleagues. I had watched all the videos that I could. I had seen the really gorgeous pictures of Earth from space. But I think there's something when you experience something yourself where the awesomeness of it it's more than just seeing it, right? It's kind of, it gets in you. You feel it. You're open, your heart and your mind to it. It just really is impressive. And man, I don't remember if we were over land or water. My guess is water, because that's most of what what we see out at the window. But what I remember is just all the colors that we know Earth to be, just glowing in a way, iridescent, translucent, all of those kinds of artsy words that you might use to describe something, but just glowing in a way, crystal clear against the blackest black I had ever seen. And I can tell you, every view out the window afterwards impressed and surprised in some way. It never got old. It never got boring. You never wanted to go pull the shade down, the window shade down to watch the movie or whatever. It just like it welcomed you, invited you in, and you wanted to like search, explore, and discover something new every time you looked out the window.
How did you feel? How did you feel?
It was a bit overwhelming at first. I mean, I felt like I had convinced myself that I would, have some understanding of what this was going to be like, right? And when I think back on it, it's like I had kind of prepped myself here, and yet the experience was like way up here. And so it was a bit overwhelming how beautiful it was, how much of a reality check it was that, oh my gosh, we do live on a planet in space. We all learn that when we're in kindergarten, yet there's this like the reality of it out the window, and the movement and I don't know, just the glowiness of it was a bit overwhelming. But I felt there was a very calming feeling to it. It was, we were speaking earlier and you used the word grounded, and there was this grounded kind of sensation from it, this awareness of what that place is to us, this kind of calming nature of that. And I think I was realizing that, man, this is what awe. I can safely use the word awesome when I describe what I'm seeing out the window.
Right.
Yeah.
How I hear this is you were struck, you're awestruck. And I think many of us, most of us, hopefully all of us listening, have that experience of awe in our lives.
Yeah.
And that comes in different ways and forms. And what I'm also struck by is the awe you felt by seeing reality in such a total way, in such a at such a level of abstraction that most of us never get to see, and yet be in it and see the perfection in that. That's what I'm sensing, what you were saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I love that you said you hope that everybody has been awestruck at some point, have felt that, because what I really like to convey is that, don't get me wrong, highly recommend it. If you get a chance to go to space and experience Earth out the window out that way, or, for minutes or days or months, whatever it might be, go for it. I highly recommend it. But what I think has become even more clear to me, and it continues to feel this way, is that you don't have to go to space to understand that feeling of seeing Earth from space that way. You don't, there is so much awe and wonder that we are surrounded by every day here on Earth, if we open our hearts and our minds to it, and I experience it every day now, is like, I can be looking at the flower garden behind my backyard, and I'm getting some of that same kind of sensation that I did looking out the window at our planet. And I think we need to do that for ourselves. In your opening today about what's been going on, in the US election and all that stuff, I think we need to really, really open ourselves up to this awe and wonder, and let it kind of sink in and help guide the way we manage ourselves, manage the way we deal with people around us. And I think it lifts us up. It doesn't bring us down. It really lifts us up to appreciate, who and where we all are in space together,
Yes. What strikes me is a practice that I sometimes like to do is, okay, I can do awe and wonder when I look at a waterfall, or I'm on a mountain here in the desert somewhere. Can I feel the awe and wonder when I see the political candidate that I did not vote for? Or can I see the awe and wonder for people that I do think are doing things whose choices I disagree with? Like, can I still see that? And what I'm curious about when you say this in terms of coming back, because I almost like I feel that in your story is the gravitational pull of coming back to Earth and saying, okay, so how am I going to apply what I've learned? So tell us about how you've learned from being in space about applying that perspective. And I think awe and wonder is probably just a piece of that.
Yeah.
To how you live, how you look at the flowers in your garden, how you look at the problems in the world too. I mean, your house was just flooded by a hurricane, I understand, and you're sitting in an office makeshift kind of now to do this conversation with me. So tell us about that. How's things shifted for you? How you're applying that perspective?
Well, I mean, I try to do it in everything. And I think that you use the words, and I'm grateful that you did, about being a crewmate, being crew members, right? I think there's something very simple yet powerful in this understanding, first of all, that we're all on the same planet, right? We all live on this planet in space together. It's our planetary spaceship, right? When I think about it, the way I was able to live on this machine in space, right? We build this International Space Station, the space shuttle, all these machines to mimic as best we can what Earth does for us naturally, just so we can survive in that place. And every morning on that machine, we wake up, and one of the very first things we do is we check how much carbon dioxide's in our atmosphere and how much clean drinking water we have, and the integrity of our thin metal hull. And absolutely, we check on the health and well-being of all the people we're in that place with, right? And so when I came back to Earth, when I was reflecting on this experience I'd had, off the Earth, which I always like to say is all about being for the Earth. Everything we're doing there is ultimately about improving life on Earth. So it was those things, this planet, we're all Earthlings, the thin blue line, those were the things that kept coming to me, the only border that matters, that thin blue line of atmosphere. And how just really wrapped up in all of that is how important it is for us to accept our role as crewmates and not passengers. And so the one thing that sticks out to me every day of my life since having that experience is, first of all, I wake up in the morning, my feet hit the floor, and I'm like, I am on a planet in space. Right now, where we are sitting, you're in Arizona, I'm in Florida, Nico's in Thailand. We are all on a planet in space, spinning right now at 1,000 miles an hour together, orbiting the sun at 67,000 miles an hour. And how important it is for me to take those first steps out of my, when I wake up in the morning, walking on this planet, and remind myself that it is really important for me to behave like a crewmate and not a passenger in everything I do, whether it's the way I deal with my dog or the people I work with or this conversation that we're having today. There is a big difference. Or it's a follow-on to an election where the person you did not vote for may have won. We need to continue to accept our role as crewmates and be participating members of the crew. And that's a big difference to being a passenger and expecting stuff to happen for you, around you, and not be involved.
Tell us about how you apply this in situations that you find really challenging. So, because all of us, I think, have access in some way to this higher perspective, who we want to be. And then, man, I was walking on the street on Tuesday and I saw somebody with the other t-shirt, and my brain was like, ooh, and I felt physically ill, and that was going on in my mind. So tell us about maybe a challenging situation you've been through, and how you, or maybe going through, and how you are applying this perspective. So we as Earthlings can learn from you how to be good crewmates also when stuff on the spaceship are not going so well.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's just something as simple as a t-shirt, right? How it can make you wonder, what in the world is that person thinking? And then I think it's a matter of stepping back. I don't know what that person's experiences are. I don't know really and truly. And it's the same in every day. When you encounter somebody that's just a little bit ruder to you than you want them to be, would expect them to be. And you're like, hey, I do not know what's going on in this person's life, right? And having to just chill a little bit. But I think one of the things, and in addition to the crewmate passenger thing, because it does sound a little bit kumbaya, right? Like, oh, it's so easy to just say you're going to be a crewmate, not a passenger. But one of the things I learned very early on as an engineer for NASA, working on the space shuttle program, we're getting these spaceships ready to fly. People that were astronauts were getting ready to fly on them, and they were going to go do these really complex, challenging things. And one of my very favorite people on the planet, a gentleman named Jay Honeycutt, was my boss at the time when I first started out, young 20-something. And he had worked through the Apollo program, all the challenges they had getting to the moon and doing all of those really complex things. And he said to all of us young engineers, he's like, you know what? First of all, everything we do, there is going to be some challenge or some complexity to it. And you have to go into it believing there is a solution to the problem. That's number one. And then in the way you deal with the problem needs to be with a here's how we can, not why we can't approach to it. And I have a little astronaut guy on my desk now with this little sign that says, here's how we can, not why we can't, with Jay Honeycutt's name on it, under it, because it applies to everything. It applies to how you might deal with that person that's walking across the street with the other, t-shirt on, to want to get below the surface, right? To want to understand where that person is coming from. And then it's like, okay, how can we, because it's all the same problems that we're trying to solve, right?
Yeah.
And so how can we find the solutions to this versus getting bogged down in the why we can't or what we disagree on? And really that pathway to agreement is a big deal. You think about the International Space Station program, right? I've got this patch. I always go the wrong way on this thing, with these 15 different countries, wrapped around this view of the International Space Station, for over 25 years, where as representatives of these 15 different countries through the 5 international space agencies, we have somehow managed to operate peacefully and successfully in that place. Because number one thing we did was we established the rules of engagement, and here's what our mission is. And it seems like, and we need to be doing that down here. And every engagement we have is like, okay, how am I going to deal with this situation? And I'm going to decide right up front that we have a solution to this problem. And I am going to bury myself in the ways that we can get it done and not get bogged down in the ways that we can't, or that we think we can't.
I love it. And again, to make sure that we don't come across as too kumbaya.
Yeah.
I love this. To me, what your boss said was probably hard-won and hard-earned wisdom. Can you tell us maybe about a difficult situation that you had in space or at some point in your career where you had to struggle a little bit and came out on the other side? Can you tell us about that? Because
I think what I'm struggling with is figuring out, like trying to think of one in particular, right? One of the things that I think is interesting is we, on the space station, we're a crew of 6 or 7 people that represent, look at me do it, I do it every single time, represent, in that entire time, we're representing, even if we don't have somebody from one of these countries on board, we are representing them as part of that crew of 6 or 7. And at any given time, there's a commander of that crew of 6 or 7. And we're living on one space station. It's not like the Europeans can only go into the European module and the US crew members can only go in the US laboratory. And I mean, we are one crew on one station with one commander that represents this entire, cooperative kind of arrangement. And What's nice about being the crew on the space station itself is you've got these tens of thousands of people on the ground that are dealing with all the little intricacies of the problems that might be happening, whether that's politically or technically, to help us out. But ultimately, we're the ones that have to manage it in that place. And I'll tell you, there's the official language on the space station is English, but we all have to learn to speak Russian because it's part of the agreement. And culturally, there are differences in the way that people want to or have grown up managing problems. And I know this is like this long-winded, rambling way of saying that what I found really extraordinary was how you can have all of that different kind of stuff going on, and yet everyone, when it really, really matters, for instance, 3 o'clock in the morning and you're getting an alarm, woken up by an alarm that says there's a big hole in your spaceship and all the air is spewing out. I mean, when people can rally, and I mean, it was like the proudest I was on the space station was when we were dealing with challenges that really and truly could be life-threatening or could cause the end of the program. And it was this kind of this leveler of all of us, like, okay, here's what we're really here for. Here's what our mission is, and here's how we have to treat each other in order to be able to survive. And it was kind of, it was really pleasing, because there's a lot of times where when that kind of stuff is going on, people tend to go like find their corners, right? And this was nothing like that. I just watched us coming together every time something like that was going on. And again, it's not like, this like exact example, but I love that you can, I witnessed it, how we could be from all different kinds of backgrounds.
Yeah.
We can have all different kinds of beliefs. And yet in what really matters, based on what we have come to agree on, we are going to be able to support each other and survive to the extreme that, the extent that's humanly possible, I guess. And that can apply everywhere.
I love that you mentioned it as the leveler.
Yeah.
Like, listen, the bottom line is that we want to survive and we want to make sure that this program continues.
Yeah.
And therefore, we have a mission and we have some rules of engagement that include collaboration, even if our habits might be to disconnect into our geographical, cultural, or preferential corners. And we're not going to do that. We're going to take a break in a moment. After the break, I want to ask you to maybe tell us about a specific incident, and maybe tell us about what happened with Nicole in that incident, and what you learned from that, what you learned from the specifics of that incident, because I think that people learn a lot from hearing you tell the really nitty-gritty human part of the story, right? Because we see the perfect story so well on TV, and it sounds so good, and then our neighbor doesn't turn the sprinkler on, we get very upset, or like the colleague in the office is not collaborating or not hearing us, and we disconnect, or we feel overwhelmed and we are not being our best. So I'd love you to think about an example of that. We're going to take a short break in a moment, and then we'll maybe think about a specific incident.
Okay,
Nicole.
I'm trying.
And before we take a break, for the people that are listening without video, Nicole is wearing a jacket, which I believe is an astronaut jacket. Is that right?
Yeah. Instead of just looking like an old lady, I thought I'd wear the astronaut jacket for you.
Hardly an old lady. And it has a lot of the stickers on it from that celebrate her 100 years in space. And then also there's a beautiful round sticker on it that has a bunch of flags and the symbol of the space program in the middle, suggesting the International Space Program. You've been listening to Rooted and Unwavering. I'm so grateful that I'm here with Nicole Stott, an astronaut, aquanaut, and we've been talking about situational awareness, about taking the bigger perspective and being a crewmate, not a passenger, and practicing this wisdom of how can we solve this? Yes, we will solve this. How will we solve this? See you after the break.
You are listening to Rooted and Unwavering, presented by Growth Leaders Network, the leadership, team, and culture development company. If you would like to learn more about working on connectedness for yourself, your team, or organization, please contact Growth Leaders Network on LinkedIn. And now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Rooted and Unwavering. We're talking to Nicole Stott, aquanaut, astronaut, about situational awareness and how do we really practice being good crewmates here on Earth. Well, the question that I would love to come back to is, so tell us about an incident where your connectedness with yourself and others was really tested, maybe out there in space, and what did you learn from it?
I think, and I think this happened in probably a couple different ways. We do a lot of training to prepare, as you can imagine, to prepare to go to space. And you mentioned in my bio one training program that we do in particular that's called NEMO. It stands for NASA Extreme Environment Mission Operations. Like I was telling you, I think they just wanted to name it NEMO, so they figured out how to make that acronym work. But we're living in an extreme environment underneath the ocean in this school bus size habitat for an extended period of time. And ultimately, like in all of the training we do, it's about discovering how to work as a good, successful team, as a crew. And involved in a lot of that is you as an individual having to discover maybe your own strengths and weaknesses, right? And then, there's a lot of type A personalities, as you can imagine, that are in the astronaut office or in, fields like this. And it's difficult sometimes to accept that you might have a weakness and that somebody else might be better than you at something. But what I found in these kind of training situations, it was really kind of refreshing to be able to discover those things. And for me, the incident or the kind of incidents I would say that really stood out were ones where I was particularly challenged, where I was out of my comfort zone in a way that I never had been before. And that happened when, we did this Utah Canyonlands trip. There's 6 of us. We're out there for 10 days and we're on our own. And I'm not a hiker kind of person necessarily. I like it, but I've never done extreme versions of that. And so it was challenging to me. And what I found was if we let ourselves, the people around us will lift us up. They will support us, even in what you might think of as a competitive situation where you're all training and trying to get to the same, like a mission assignment or get to go to space. People can put that aside. And, you were mentioning, you said something about TV, how perfect it looks on TV. And I always think every time I go into the movie theater and I watch a movie about where they try to make the drama in the space movie be about the way the people treat each other and how divisive and they're only worried about their own survival or not worried about the survival of their crew, or there's some kind of backstabbing thing going on. And it couldn't be further from the truth. In the astronaut office, it is so not like that. I think everybody that I have encountered, and we discover it as part of this training, where we are putting ourselves in places that we just don't normally go, And the most difficult of those for me was the underwater experience, because I was a scuba diver, but I was recreational scuba diver. Right? I didn't want it to be taking my mask off. I didn't want somebody messing with my regulator or having to swim around without, all these kind of advanced skill things that I had to mentally overcome to be able to do that, and physically, go train to be able to survive in that. Because at 60 feet underwater, after an hour, you can't swim safely to the surface to escape a problem. So you have to, you and your crew have to get into a safe configuration before you can go back to the top. And the same is true in space. You can't just hop in your spaceship anytime you want. If something goes wrong up there and come back to Earth, you have to get your crew and the vehicle in a safe configuration first. And that for me was I don't know. I don't think I'm really answering your question, Hylke, but it's like,
Yes. Yeah.
it goes to the same thing. It's like accepting, first of all,
Mm.
that we don't all have the answers to everything, right? And that our colleagues who we are depending on, who are depending on us, might have those answers, might be the stronger one in the situation that can then lift us all up. And I look for that everywhere I go now. And the people I work with, I'm looking, first of all, okay, is the purpose, do we have a similar purpose in mind with what we're doing? Are you somebody I'm going to want to work with, that I'm going to have a good time? I'm going to enjoy myself. But at the same time, when it hits the fan, when things are not going well, are you going to be the one I can trust to have my back? And will I know that you'll look in my eyes and trust that I'll have yours? And that's the way I'm trying to apply everything I learned in space is, and it comes down to being a crewmate, sounds kind of hokey, but it's like, you've got to understand your own limitations, and you've got to be willing to accept help from others in order to make that all work.
That sense of, I sense a sense of trust. Like there's a sense of I'm going to trust. I'm really struck by this example, Nicole, of being out in Utah hiking.
Yeah.
I love hiking. So it's like, yeah, anytime. And I'm sure it was extreme. And it sounds like there was an element of being in selection process before becoming an astronaut. So there was a bit of like, almost like Survivor, like that TV program, but not quite. And yet what you discovered was people will be there for me. It's not like the Hunger Games where we have to kill each other, right? It is.
And that's such a great thing, isn't it? To know and it made me happy to know that NASA and our other, space agencies, that's the kind of person they're looking for. You can be in competition for something, but the best way that for you to survive and to shine is to be the one lifting everybody else up at the same time. And, I mean, we do interviews. I was fortunate enough to be on the other side of the table before I retired from NASA to get to interview candidates coming in for the office, right, to be selected as astronaut candidates. And once you get to that table for the interview, you've already satisfied, right, the career and education requirements, right? I want to know what kind of person you are. Do I want to be locked up in a relatively confined space for months at a time with you? Do you have a personality? Are you going to set the torque wrench back to zero? Are you going to be respectful of the other 5 or 6 people that are in this confined space with you? And are you going to have my back when, things don't go as planned, as they will? And it's interesting the kind of conversations you can have where you can kind of eke that out just by talking to somebody. And I love that that's what we're not just looking at the person who can fly an airplane or do the science. We're looking at the whole person. Like, do they use their whole brain? Are they going to be the person, like you said, that you can trust in whatever situation?
Yes. Because I'm thinking that many of us, and I see this with teams all the time, that we hesitate to reach out for help, or we hesitate to bring up the difficult issue, or we hesitate to say, I don't know yet, because we are wired to think that the other person's gonna take advantage. Like we fear other people as we fear parts of ourselves. And what you're saying is, no, actually, there is a part alive and well in human beings that even in a very competitive, very high stakes situation where everybody wants to become an astronaut and get to space, is those people that actually win, paradoxically, are those that take care of each other.
Absolutely. And it's really nice to know that is going on. And, and I think it's happening in other places too. Yeah. A lot of my colleagues and I, we talk a lot about like, what's the secret sauce, that NASA or human spaceflight, I would say is a really good example of it. There's a lot going on with, how we welcome different people to even participate in things, in different jobs, in experiences. And man, the NASA astronaut office, the human spaceflight program in just 50 years, we've gone from, if you just look at women, we've gone from one woman in mission control, one woman in the launch control center, to both of those really critical operations being run by extraordinary women. And now when you look at all of the people sitting in those controls, it's just this mix of humanity, of all different kinds of humans. Every flavor, is in that mix. And the same in the astronaut office. There's about 40 active NASA astronauts right now. I would say it's about 50-50 female, male in that office. You don't see that. You don't even see that in the demographic of the university students that, the program. I mean, and most engineering programs struggle to have, 20% female enrollment in their programs, not to mention the other demographics that, you want to get in the mix. Yeah. And I think the underlying, maybe the secret sauce is in the fact that when NASA hires, or NASA is looking for people, or NASA is coming up with new programs and how they want to support that, they are just welcoming whomever.
Right.
It's a very welcoming environment, and people feel that way when they come into it, versus getting any sense that you're, because I have brown hair and my feet are, kind of big, I'm not going to get in the door, or whatever characteristic it is, or belief, or, any of it. And I think we need to learn how to, instead of saying we need this many of this person and this many of that person, and what, the successful, they're not, we need to just figure out, how do we welcome everyone who might want to be part of this? And I think we'll be opening many, many more doors if we start doing that. I think, and it allows not just I think about experiential diversity, but, across the board, it starts to work. And it's why this patch, I did again, you look at all these different countries, all the different cultures and backgrounds and histories that are coming together to make these crews successful. And it's because there's all these different little flavors of things and thoughts about stuff that make the solution to the problems even better than they would be if you just were looking at any one flag on the.
So what strikes me is that what NASA does in some way is to teach us about interconnectedness.
Absolutely.
Planetarily, where we are as a species on this planet, with other planets especially, and it does so by having a culture of interconnectedness, which is a much higher wisdom than, on average, we're able to practice on planet Earth today. Right? It feels like NASA, in a way, by having connected itself to such a high mission, which at a nuts and bolts level seems to be about getting people into space, but at the, you could say, more esoteric level, energetic level, it's about teaching us as humans something about interconnectedness and the bigger view. Like the first question we had today was about what it's like, and that awe, right? And everybody has that dream for that, and I think part of that is to be able to name that and say, aspiration in everyone is that interconnectedness, and we can only experience that by actually practicing that.
Yeah, I mean, we have to open ourselves to it. And, I love the way you're saying that, because, I think interconnectivity is at all of it. And this idea of connection, right? We go out in space, we go onto the space station, and I really love it when people develop an understanding of the fact that all these people coming together, the tens of thousands on the ground across the planet that are working together to make it possible for us to do that, and then the 6 or 7 people on the station. One of the coolest things is that everything we're doing there together is ultimately about improving life on Earth. Bringing that value of what we can do in space back to Earth. And then, you think about this connection and relationship. I spoke to looking out the window and feeling more connected to this planet than I had, maybe acknowledged that I did when I was on it. And the same thing is true when we send, our robotic missions out, right? We go, Cassini, the Cassini mission that went to Saturn, New Horizons out to Pluto, and the rovers that are on Mars. And we're learning all of these really incredible things about our place in the universe, how these planets are related to us, and, about the rings of Saturn, that we all grew up, these iconic, like that planet kind of thing. And then in the end, the thing that strikes us the most, and I get goosebumps thinking about it, the thing that strikes us the most is that picture of Saturn and the rings with the little dot of light below it. That's us. And we're like, oh my God, it's like, oh, because you can then make a connection. You can establish a relationship to that planet through that little dot of light that doesn't look like Earth at all. It just looks like this little dot of light. And yet we know that's us. We want to understand our place in it all. Yeah. And I think that's what space and believing there's a solution to the problem, wanting to go at things where it's about how we can do it and not getting bogged down and why we can't. That's why politics is such a pain, right? There's all this getting bogged down with the here's why we can't, when we really need to be looking at here's how we can. And I love it. I love that space exploration does that for us. And I don't know, I just see so much in it. And when you think about like the back to Earth stuff too, like what's coming back to us, we'll get, I get this all the time, like, well, what are we doing going off to space and spending all this money in space when we have all these problems here on Earth? And I'm like, oh my gosh, everything we're doing in space is about improving life on Earth. NASA and others might not communicate it as well as we need to, but that's the fact. And all of these problems, these planetary challenges that we have, whether it's energy or water or, whatever it might be around our planetary spaceship, the majority of the information that we need to solve those problems is coming to us from space. And, on a day-to-day basis, we just don't realize it's so ubiquitous. I mean, I'm going to pick this thing up. This is like the magic box, right? Where does it all come from? It's, yes. And it has its roots in what we do in space every day.
I was so struck by when you talked about Saturn and the little point prick of light of Earth, and saying that everything we do is about improving life on Earth, and how we relate to this is like we get goosebumps because we become aware of our place in the whole. Right now, I'm gonna invite us to make that super micro, meaning our place on this in the whole, as you and I, as Nicole, as Hylke, as whoever is listening. Nico, who is supporting us from Thailand with the technology, like all of us who are listening, like how is this informing you as you put your feet on the ground, as you do your work? How does this inform you?
Well, I think it goes back to the situational awareness thing, and to the idea of the awe and wonder, right? You use the words awestruck, and I try to look for that every day in everything. And the way I think about it is, remember back in 1968, that was the first time the humans, the Apollo 8 mission went to the moon. They didn't land, they orbited the moon, and that's where we got that iconic Earthrise image. That, and I get goosebumps thinking about that. Like, can you imagine being those guys in that spaceship and you're, going around this gray moon, and then out of nowhere, this gorgeous colored planet rises above the horizon of the moon in front of you like that. And then they shared it with all of us, right? It was this awakening, I think. And I think that's what I try to build into every day. And I think about it like Earthrise moment, that definitely was an Earthrise moment for humanity, actually, right? There's the who and where we all are in space together, no denying it, except for those three guys that were orbiting the moon. And we can bring that into our lives every day in some way. We can think about our kids. We can, you don't even have to be looking at something. It can just be a memory of something. I mean, before we started the podcast today, we took a couple minutes just to chill, just to be quiet and meditate on the conversation we're going to have, on maybe what was going to go on our day, but just to kind of transcendentally, if nothing else, like to transcend where we were about to be. And I think that's really important, that peace, that Earthrise idea of what we can bring into our lives every day. to impact every decision we make, how we have this exchange together. And I'm hoping that the folks in DC will be doing that same kind of thing, right? We kind of keep coming back to that in this relative time frame, but it's the respect thing as well. It's not just being aware of what's going on around you, but like respecting that things are going to be different in different places. I love traveling with my son when he was little around the world. I think about Nico in Thailand. I mean, it's a different experience to live and be in that place. And yet the underlying motivation of every human everywhere is survival and thriving and love and their family and all of those that's happening everywhere. And, the more we look at ourselves living on a planet together as our planetary spaceship with just that one thin blue line being the border that matters, I think it's that level checker again, I think.
It's the level checker. I love that you said the little blue line, that's the only line that matters, which I infer from as I think about how you wake up in the morning, thinking about, when I was waking up as a little child, I thought that my life was basically my bedroom and then the farm and the cows in the village.
Yep.
That was the world. And I made everything with that in mind. And with that comes sometimes hubris or arrogance or narrow-mindedness or whatever it is. And sometimes the lines stand out today between me and a person that may be different from me or I disagree with. And what I hear you say is, when you are connecting to that transcendental perspective, to that bigger perspective, we don't have to use difficult words, just seeing that we are part of this thing that's a piece of light separated from the rest of the universe by a blue little line, inspires a sense of awe. It inspires a sense of humility in me as I hear you talk. Also, taking myself not too seriously. At the same time, like there's an automatic wanting to serve. Like it's like almost like holding a baby. You want to take care of it. You cannot do damage. It's just too beautiful. Like when somebody gives you a beautiful flower, you're not going to crush it. You just want to hold it. And all of that comes to me. So I'm so grateful that you're sharing this with us today. So tell us in these last few minutes, because this hour flew by, what is Nicole working on today?
Well, my house, first of all, but but what we talked about earlier, I am really trying to, in whatever I'm doing, if I'm at a school talking, if I'm doing a keynote for a company somewhere, or if I'm really getting to focus on the work of like the Space for Art Foundation or this organization called Space for a Better World, underlying it all, I think, is purpose, is really looking to try to be extending the experience I had in space in a way that's meaningful. And, I'm finding that the place I can do that best is by using my art to communicate with audiences that might not otherwise even know we have a space station, let alone that we are off the Earth for the Earth. In all of that work that we're doing, how we can come together as an international community to do really good, positive things for our planet and for the people that, and I would say not just, but all life that occupies our planet together. And I think there's something to, and the connection to me too is really important. That's why I really was happy to take on this conversation with you, Hylke, is because I think that's such an important word, and extending it to the interconnectivity idea, and embedded in all that is inspiration, right? It's I really feel like, there's education and there's information, but we need to be inspiring people to think about the solutions, to think about this planet that we share. And, when we go to space, I remember it. I remember wanting to look back to Earth and seeing Florida. I wanted to see Florida because I thought of Florida as my home. And very quickly, Florida became this beautiful part of a planet that's my home. And that's exactly what I think you were getting to in the context of the last words you were saying, is that, broadening yourself beyond the farm to a planet that's your home. And it is such, I don't know, there's really good purpose in that. And what you were saying too is, I think in that, you then cannot deny the call to action that comes from it. The necessity for you to behave like a crewmate, not a passenger. And if I do nothing else in the rest of my life, I hope that I can, in whatever work I'm doing, whatever art I'm creating, either on my own or with kids and other people around the world, I want there to be purpose in it. And I really want people to think about me like, wow, she was a pretty good crewmate in all of this.
And you're inviting us to see our
absolutely join
our
the crew.
Whether you like it or not, we're all in it already. We're in this spaceship. There's no selection process. We're here.
And it's funny, isn't it? I think it's simple yet really, really powerful. This distinction between crewmate and passenger, by choosing the path of the crewmate, I mean, we really do. We have the power together to create a future for all life on Earth that's as beautiful as it looks from space. And that is a compelling call to action. I think it's what we all, like, at our core, are hopeful to do with the gifts that we have, that we can bring to bear. And why not do it? Join the crew.
So what would you say to, last question, what would you say to a person who is not feeling it today, who is just feeling overwhelmed by whatever problem they have, whether it's at work with a teammate, maybe they are at financial challenge, maybe they lost their job, maybe they have a health challenge, maybe there's a family situation, maybe they're feeling very overwrought with global warming, maybe they're worried about the genocide that happens, anything. What would you say to a person that just feels like,
yeah. I mean, that's a difficult question, because we all have everybody has something going on, right? But I think that I would kind of go back to what you had us do before we got on this call. I have found that the closest I can get to that just immersive, transcendent experience that I had looking out the window of a spaceship is meditation, is earthing, is allowing yourself, even in the midst of, and I've been doing it a lot lately with a flooded house, is just to kind of step outside of it a little bit and take a moment, just chill. And it seems a little bit selfish, actually. I mean, I think in the midst of all of those things that you just described, some of the worst things, things you just don't want to have to be a part of or know are going on, is like to just really chill and take a moment and allow yourself to calm in a way that we don't always do for ourselves. And I found when I do that, I don't know, my mind opens up to think about things a little bit more positively. I can see better where I might have a place, as part of the solution, and not, we, in all of that goes on, we really do. I think it's human beings. I think we have a tendency to get bogged down in the, man, this is overwhelming part of it. And yet there's always some little thing that we can be doing to make it better. And, so I'm really, really pleased that you had us chill before the call.
And I appreciate you pointing that out, and also putting that into the very almost mundane but very real challenge of having a house that's flooded, and saying, hey, even astronaut Earthling's crewmate Nicole needs to chill and take a step back, right? And
ask my husband. Yeah.
He tell you about it. Yes. So even, and I think that's such a beautiful takeaway for me, even when we've seen the most beautiful thing, the human things that we encounter can still get us off kilter.
Absolutely.
It's still possible. And we then can restore ourselves to perspective, to sanity, by taking a step back. And maybe that provides us with that view from the window that you were sitting at those years ago.
Yeah.
That's like, oh, this is the bigger part I'm part of. This is the higher intelligence that I'm part of. And what's my part of that? It's a very humble and yet resolute step back. to see the bigger picture. Nicole, anything you'd like to say to close this conversation?
Well, I just want to thank you for inviting me to even have the conversation. I love that there's different audiences around the world that are open to these conversations and to hearing what, little tidbits might come out of what I might say, But I think this is big steps in the crewmate process, if you will, in the recruiting of crewmates for our planetary home, and I'm hopeful that through this, somebody, if just one person got a little glimmer of what might be possible for them, I'm hopeful in that. So thank you for including me.
Thank you, Nicole. It's been a true honor and a true pleasure to sit with you and to be part of a recruitment effort for crew members to live with you in that experience of how you've experienced the transcendence in the bigger perspective, and to take that away and say, hey, maybe that informs that bigger perspective, that there are always possibilities when you take that bigger perspective. So you've been listening to Rooted and Unwavering. If you like this podcast, you can always find us on Spotify, Apple, and wherever else you find your podcast. These are also recorded in LinkedIn and YouTube and other places you can find them. This was episode 49. I was here with Nicole Stott, aquanaut, astronaut, mom, artist, crew member, and crew member recruiter. And you've been listening to Rooted and Unwavering, where we help leaders from all walks of life connect more deeply to their innate potential. Become a crew member. See you next time at Rooted and Unwavering.
Thank you for joining us in today's episode of Rooted and Unwavering, leadership conversations about courageous connectedness, presented by the leadership development company, Growth Leaders Network. To learn more, subscribe to this podcast. Connect with Growth Leaders Network and Hylke Faber on LinkedIn, or read Hylke's award-winning book, Taming Your Crocodiles. Now take a moment and appreciate something that is great about you. Celebrate the gift that you are and enjoy connecting more deeply to your best self today. See you next time on Rooted and Unwavering.